all these other small stuff kind of creeping in my mind. But the whole time, God has actually given me this strange confidence. And anybody who's walked with God, followed God in the big, when things are really real, the confidence that comes is the same and real. But it was really interesting because when I was having this conversation with the CEO who finally showed up, he wasn't really scary, wasn't mean, but he made this off comment that put a chill in my spine. He goes, you're a very strange American. I'm like, really? Okay. It's like, you walk around here like nothing could happen to you. It's like kind of like saying, Americans out here aren't very safe. So I looked at him like, are you threatening me? I'm like, should I be? He goes like, no, don't worry. I'm not going to do anything bad to you. But then, like he said it again. You're a very strange American. Americans shouldn't feel so safe around here. And when I walked out of that place eventually, I never got to see the church. He wouldn't let me in further than past the front area. I looked at my surroundings a little differently. And I realized, maybe for the first time, wow, this is not a safe area that it looks like out in the way boonies up in north the mountains in India. And every time, it's kind of interesting, that I got a little glimpse of how unsafe I was. On the flip side, a wave of, I got you. You don't have to worry. I'm with you. And a freedom kind of emotion. I think that's what he was saying. He was like, that CEO, he's kind of saying, what's wrong with you? Why are you so unafraid? And part of it was naivete. It really wasn't. I knew it was not the safest area, but part of it was I just felt so at rest in God. It is a strange experience to be in a place where you shouldn't feel safe. And yet because God is with you, you are doing his will, you are following him, you feel so at rest. It is a strange experience. But actually, it's not strange for those who experience God and walking with God. It is the very experience that we're called to have day in, day out. I read a lot of stories of missionaries. I read a lot of stories of the church that's persecuted. I read a lot of stories. And sometimes, I get so moved at the courageousness of Christians in those contexts. And I got a little taste of that when I was in India, each time I go. But the interesting part is, it's the little things in my life, the little things that I let fear and anxiety kind of influence and motivate me. Even on a trip when I go to India, you know what I'm most freaked out about? It's really sad. God always reminds me. I get to the airport, and I won't give them my bag, okay? I have to carry on my carry bag, because once one of our team members lost his bag, and he had to borrow my underwear. It was such a traumatic experience. I'm like, never again. So even in a domestic flight, I carry this carry-on bag. I don't care. I'm really anxious about the bag. And God's probably thinking to yourself, it's okay. You're fine. Why do you have to be so worried? But I'm just waiting there, and I'm praying. And if our bags come out late, I'm freaking out. It's the little things. It's the little things, the things that I'm afraid of losing. It's the little things, sometimes, of the way people look at you or little comments that they make. And on the one hand, we can have this boldness. But on the other hand, even in the middle, you're just sitting there, and before you know it, a thought passes your mind. What if we don't have enough? My kids are going to go to college soon. I'm starting to think about, college. They just kind of whiff through your heart and your mind, your future, okay, your needs, your finances, the people that you care and love, their future. These things that are so important to us, oftentimes, we allow fear to motivate. And we can hear these stories of people on mission or our missionaries. We can experience the seasons of boldness and confidence to be and to do as a person who's following Christ. But oftentimes, the battle of actually following Christ is not just in the big, it's in the small. We are going through a whole series on what it means to follow Jesus. That every Christian is a Christ follower. Not just washed in the blood of Christ, cleansed and no longer bearing the wrath of God. You have a ticket to heaven. But actually, it's a whole different identity. Not just loved like a child, as a child of God, but in fact, as a follower of Christ. This defines us. And we've been walking through this. What does it look like to be a follower? And we talked about how a follower doesn't have to be the super Christian who has everything, who knows everything, and is perfect in their behavior. In fact, in order to follow Christ, you have to be a sinner. You have to be someone who recognizes you need someone to follow. You need to grow. You need Jesus. We've talked about also last week about what does it look like, and this is Pastor Richard, what does it look like to take next steps with Jesus? That you have to sometimes even go and take an inconvenient step to trust him, and then God shows up. And that his goal ultimately is for us to follow him in everything. Today, we're talking about the reality that when you follow Jesus, whether you like it or not, you're going to have to learn, you and I are going to have to learn how to handle fear. Because fear is always in contradistinction with faith. When you try to follow God, even in taking an inconvenient step, fear is going to emerge. And in fact, fear is the very place often that we find is where God wants to work. He wants to weave in us a deep trustedness where from here on out, we no longer live caged like mice. Instead, we can have this boldness. So the message is called fearless. And for our demographic, we like that word, you know. We want to do these risky things. Not all of us, some of us. You know, we want to go and climb these huge mountains. We want to fly off a plane. We want to do these, amazing things to say, look, I'm fearless. Look who I am. I am awesome. That's kind of like, some people are even adrenaline junkies. I know a little what that's like. Like you feel like really powerful when you can overcome your fears. But this is a different kind of fearlessness. Not a fearlessness that comes because you have overcome the challenges with your own courage and your own resources. It's a fearlessness that comes because you know God, and you know God is with and for you. Big difference. In the book of Matthew, in the chapter that we're in Matthew actually is talking about what do you do when you have fear? Because in this setting, this is kind of like a sermon on mission. Matthew is talking about, I'm going to send you into the towns. He's talking not only to his close disciples, but all the disciples that he's been training. And he's saying, I'm going to send you on a mission trip. And this is what you're going to experience, not just this time, but in general. When you are following me, these are the things that you're going to experience. And so you heard that passage where it says, so you don't have to be afraid of them. This is the backstory. What did Jesus tell them before he told them, don't be afraid? Okay? He's not just talking about fears and phobias, and all of us have them. He's talking about this. I am sending you out like sheep among wolves. Okay? Therefore, be as shrewd as snakes, not as innocent as doves. Be on your guard, because you're going to be handed over to the local authorities and to be flogged in the synagogues. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine if we had a flogging? Somebody you tore their back and then you start whipping them till they bleed? Because that's the punishment they're supposed to receive when you're an enemy of God. Can you imagine what they're hearing? Don't expect that people are going to like you. They're going to clap and say, oh, we want more. Don't expect they're going to actually respect you. In fact, you might be handed over to the local authorities and be flogged in synagogues. On my account, he continues on, this is Matthew chapter 10, verse 18. On my account, you'll be brought before governors and kings as witnesses to them and to the Gentiles. And this is not like, oh, you get to meet, Bill Gates. You get to meet like, the princes of Britain, Prince Harry. It's not like you're encountering a celebrity. You're up there because you're on trial, and your fate is being discussed here, right? When they arrest you, not if they arrest you, when they arrest you, do not worry about what you're going to say or how you're going to say it. At that time, you'll be given what to say. And Andy Stanley, who talks about this, is kind of like, he's putting himself in that situation, and he's like, if I'm arrested, I'm going to be flogged, and my life is in peril, I'm not going to be thinking about, what do I say? I'm thinking about, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to my family? What's going to happen to me? But in fact, all of this is being prepared for them. Saying, be ready, because all of these things can and happen. Brother will betray brother to death. Father his child. Children will rebel against their parents and have them put to death. You will be hated by everyone because of me, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. This is not easy stuff. Come on, guys. Go on a mission trip. Experience God. Get a little, exposure to culture. Have the time of your life. This is, whoa. Who would sign up for a trip like this? Okay. In fact, every time I share about India, and each year my own experience sometimes gets a little hard. It gets challenging. I'm out of my comfort zone. And I always get at least one or two people who say, Pastor Martin, you shouldn't tell about, all of your troubles because nobody's going to want to go. It's kind of true. Who would want to go? But I love the fact that Jesus is so honest. When you follow him, maybe you're not going to have these experiences. Your children are not going to put you to death, right? There are going to be experiences where it's going to blow your mind. You're going to feel pain. You're going to feel suffering just on account of him. You're going to have to make choices that rubs up against your family. That's going to be tough because it's going to be inconvenient, and more so, even with your finances. He's saying, if you're going to follow me, you're going to experience persecution even. This is not just for missionaries and martyrs. He's saying, if you follow me, you're going to face fear of people because people are not going to be happy with you sometimes. You're going to face fear of circumstances because you're going to be put in a situation where doesn't always feel perfectly safe. Now, just because you feel safe doesn't mean it's safe, but actually, he's saying, when you're out following me, you're going to have to know how to handle fear. And so he gives them this to remind them, even though all of this is true, there's a greater truth that when you allow it to sustain you and when you experience, it gives you a boldness. It gives you a sense of fearlessness. And so after saying all of that, Jesus says, so, given all of that, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid of them, all those people, for there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, hidden that will not be made known. What is he saying? He continues on, what I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the roofs. This is the first thing, the first reason why they shouldn't be afraid. Okay? He gives three. Here's the first. Number one. Why shouldn't you be afraid? And at first, logically, this doesn't make much sense, but actually it begins to root out where your heart is. He's saying, there's going to come a day when everybody is going to know who you are, how you lived. All the choices that you made, all the words that you spoke, all the steps that you made in following Christ, it will have come to fruition. All the ways that people not only stepped up against you, all the ways that people didn't understand you, all the ways that people took the easy way out, it's all going to come out. The truth will emerge. God, who sees everything, is going to wrap everything together. If you're so concerned about what's going to happen to you in the present and not be aware of who's in control and how it's all going to play out, that's the big mistake that you can make. Now, for us, that doesn't matter much, does it? It's kind of like, wait, you're telling me that one day everybody will know? Yeah, not that important. It doesn't really help me that much. But in fact, that begins to help us to understand, what am I living for? What's really valuable? Is the present, is the avoidance of pain, is the avoidance of inconvenience the thing that life and following Jesus is about? Some people actually were told, and I saw a lot of this in church as well, that when you come to Jesus, all your wounds are healed, all your finances are fixed, everything is good, you receive dignity and you receive life, everything becomes pleasant. And you know what? I can tell you, we get a taste of this incredible love, incredible experience of God, but there is also the other side where we get challenged. Following Jesus is not easy. And our faith only begins to grow when we realize, what are we living for? Who are we living for? Now, sometimes, one of the things that actually I fear and that really I'm anxious about sometimes, I don't even know why, is when people totally misunderstand me. It's a strange thing. I think part of it has to do with when you're a pastor, your reputation counts for a lot. Not just for yourself. It's for, in fact, other people. Because these days, pastors are slipping up. And we're all human. We're all a mess. We're all hot messes, but God is gracious. But when somebody's pastor's reputation is really hit hard, guess what? People who've trusted in God through the pastor, their faith goes through a difficult thing. I've seen so much of it that I get really sensitive. And it's kind of a strange thing that, in fact, when somebody misunderstands me or puts bad light in what I'm trying to do, I get really defensive. And I find myself thinking, why am I trying to defend myself? I have these complicated reasons. But ultimately, if somebody told me, don't worry, God sees. You're in an argument and you're trying to do something right and somebody says, don't worry, I don't care what everybody said about you, God knows. Does that help you? Does that help you? If I tell it to my kids, they're like, what does that matter? What does that matter? Well, Jesus is saying it matters. There is such a confidence that when all is said and done, every person who put their trust in God and followed him, even in the midst of difficulty and inconvenience, even when they were hit with misunderstanding, even when they were persecuted, all of this is going to be brought out to the light. And he's saying we can be bold. You know, in the Sermon on the Mount, you get this little picture of, you know, if somebody slaps you across the cheek, you know, don't be aggressive, give them the other cheek. If they take your outer cloak, give them your inner cloak. You know, there's just almost like be kind of trusting in a passive way. You know, in this Sermon on the Mission, Jesus is saying, no. What I tell you, whisper to you in the dark, go ahead and shout it out in the rooftops. Because this is what it looks like to follow Jesus in this way. When it comes to trusting in him, not only for your life, but actually going out on mission for him, living missionally for him. That's the first one. Don't be afraid, because God sees and there's going to be a reckoning. Everything is going to be revealed. Okay? The second reason why we shouldn't be afraid, why we can be fearless in this. And this is a strange reason if you pay attention to it. Something that sometimes we don't quite get. It says, do not be afraid of those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. What does that mean? They can actually hurt you. They can imprison you. They can flog you. Your body and your very life is really in danger. But don't be afraid of them, even though they can do all of this. Rather, be afraid. This is a command. This is imperative. Okay? This is a place in Scripture where it says, be afraid, show fear, have fear for the one who can destroy soul and body in hell. That's pretty heavy if you think about it. Yeah. What is he saying? Don't be afraid of those people who seem to be a huge threat. Be afraid of the big one, the one who actually could be when you're on the wrong side of him. And this is where sometimes even in the Scriptures, people they portray Jesus and they portray God as this little, little cat that wouldn't harm a little kitten that wouldn't harm a fly. That's just so soft and so loving and so gracious and so on and so forth that you can just manipulate if you want. But in fact, the picture of Christ is the Lion of Judah. Okay? I don't know if you've ever been around lions. They are scary. Now, this lion is not ravaging. This lion is not destructive. There's a nobleness in this lion, as we know. What does it mean? We are called to actually realize more powerful, more strong, more consequential than the ones who can take your life is the one who has control over your life, your physical body, and your eternity. The stakes here are so much bigger than we realized. How do you have a fearlessness when you're facing somebody who's threatening your life? Okay? You have a fearlessness because you know someone who is actually even more consequential than that. That your very eternity and your life is actually in his hands. When you have a fear of God, when you realize how powerful he really is, when you respect him, when you honor him, it's not like a, don't hurt me, God, but God, you're so big, I don't want to mess with you. When you have a deep reverence for God, it changes your other fears. Over the way, Oswald Chambers, who wrote a little devotional, nobody knew how influential this devotional was going to be, but it became the most read one ever. My utmost for his highest. And he has this line in this devotional that says, the remarkable thing about fearing God, revering him, understanding how great he is, that he's not to be messed with, but followed instead. When you fear God, you fear nothing else. Okay? When you have the most powerful one who can not only kill body but soul, and who also is that gracious and that good on your side, and you're doing his will, when you're living for him, all these other little fears, like, did my bag make it? In the airplane. All those little fears, somehow, they don't bother you anymore. Because the big one, God, is with you. The flip side is also true. Whereas, if you do not fear God, then you fear everything. Isn't that interesting? When you have this fear of God, this deep awareness of how great he is and how he's also for you, a fearlessness becomes. Nothing else scares you. It might, but it doesn't motivate you. It doesn't shape you. It doesn't stop you from following. But you know what? When you don't know who God is, when you think he doesn't know where you are, he's not that big, he's not that great, guess what? And you live accordingly, then you're subject to all kinds of fears. So that's the second one. Do you know God? Are you aware how big and how awesome he really is? And even pastors, sometimes, I got to tell you, we forget. We forget. Because pastoring is sometimes a helpless activity. You can't force somebody. You can try. You can guilt somebody into it. You can try to manipulate them. That's the worst thing to do. Pastors, all they can do is pray. They can live a life of example. They can preach and they can love. But actually, that's not that powerful versus the other tools at the disposal. And sometimes it's just I've prayed prayers before. God, I don't know if you can do this. I'm being honest. Like, I don't know how it's possible. And then God shows up and he does something that you could not have done in a million years. You couldn't have imagined. And you go, oh, I'm so sorry, God. But that's the life of a follower, not just a pastor. You get to see God do miracles, things that you never could have imagined. And it starts, even in your own heart, where all these other fears are just pushed away. Here's a third reason why. It's kind of associated with the second. Why we can live fearlessly, why we don't have to fear. He says, are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. He's making an argument here. Okay? Back then, sparrows were very plentiful, as they are now. They're all over the place. Okay? They're not very distinctive birds. They just kind of eat and they fly away and do so on and so forth. And he says, 2 are sold for a penny. Sparrows are very cheap. They're the least worthful, in other words, least kind of in terms of cost-wise of the animals that they know. So he's using an analogy that everybody be very aware of. It's kind of like, you can use the language of penny. I mean, if you drop a penny, how many people pick up a penny? Some of you I know are really, really cheap, and I know you do. But most of us are like, oh, whatever, it's just a penny. Okay? It's a passing thought. Okay? Who cares about a penny? What can a penny purchase you? What's the value of a penny? That's kind of like the language here. Okay? He's saying, pennies are worthless. They're the least worthy or worthful thing that are there. Okay? But guess what? Sorry, I'm going to go back. Pennies are worthless, but God, okay, not even one of them as they fall to the ground escapes the Father's care. What is he saying? God is paying attention to even the sparrows that fall. God is not just counting every penny, but he's counting every aspect. He is that meticulous. Okay? Now, this is not meticulous in order to count pennies and to make you held him to account. He's not like some legalist. Some of you have bosses like that, are looking at every little thing you do and want progress reports and are just, oh, you missed that, you didn't cross that out, you made a mistake here. He's not like that. He's meticulous in care. He is that thoughtful. He is that invested. Why can we can live this? How can we live this fearlessness? Not only that he sees everything, and one day everything will be out and everything will show. He is that powerful. He has power to kill body and soul. But this God who is that powerful is also this meticulous in caring for us. He knows exactly what is going on in our lives. You ever had a moment like that? You're like, God, do you see? Why are you allowing this? Are you really in control? And you feel like you're spinning out of control? There's that feeling that God is not there. And Jesus is saying so clearly, the least worthy of an animal that nobody cares about, it doesn't escape his care. Okay? Continues on and saying, don't you know that even the very number of hairs on your head are being numbered? Okay, hair is valuable, right? If you actually, if you are going to buy a hair extension, those are expensive. Hairs are valuable, right? But in my house, they're not that valuable because I have 3 ladies, and I can tell you after they've done taking a shower, this is what happens. Okay, it's all over the place. And if I ask them, okay, how many hairs did you lose? The guy, I don't know, right? We don't care, right? It's actually more of a nuisance. He's saying, but this is just an illustration of how meticulous God is in care. He knows exactly how many have fallen. He knows exactly how many are there. He's taking an active count. If God is that meticulous with the number of hairs on your head, that means there is no detail. There is no need. There is no aspect of your present or your future that, in fact, that he's not already accounting for. He is that good of a Father. That powerful, that strong that you don't want to mess with him, and that active and that hands-on for your good in your life. When you realize that, something changes. All these other fears, they just kind of melt away. We don't always live that way. We always think that God is watching, but it's not a good thing. And we don't pay attention to all the fact that, in fact, he's watching, and it is to our good. We don't realize that, in fact, everything is under his meticulous care. This is a little silly, cartoon story. This is when back then they would actually have cafeteria lines, and you would go to the line, and there's a story of, in the front of the line there was these apples, and it's a Christian school, and so they put this, little sign up to say, take only one apple because God is watching. Take only one apple because God is watching, right? Well, at these kinds of schools, they're always, kids are like this. They're always testing the boundaries. They're always making all the little technicalities. I live with girls that are like this, right? They're always, finding all the little technicalities in the legal system. And so the school put up a sign, take only one apple because God is watching. But the kids, at the end, there was a pile of chocolate chip cookies. And the kids put up their own sign. You can take all you want because God's watching the apples. Don't we love to do that? God, you can watch this, but not this. Yeah. You're there, but you're not here. Right? And the great part is, God is always watching. Not as this policeman trying to just take the joy out of life, but as someone like a father who is not just only protective, but actually knows how to train those into a place of fearlessness. This is what it means. This is what Jesus means when he says, don't be afraid. You are you have so much more worth to him than just a couple sparrows. You are so much of worth to him. I realize one of the things that, at least in our environment, in our generation, we have a strange fears. One of the fears is actually to be invisible. Okay? You know what that feels like? You go into a room, nobody recognizes you, nobody gives you any kind of respect, nobody gives you any kind of appreciation. You're a nobody. And interestingly enough, in New York too, you don't want to be a nobody. Nobody's get stepped on, nobody's get nothing. And there's a strange fear. I got to make a name for myself. I have to be somebody. And oftentimes, we actually equate that with worthlessness. And God has to say, there is no nobodies in his kingdom. There are no nobodies in his family. Every person's following of him is so substantial. The stakes are so high. This might be a place where we start to think about what fears motivate us. Fears to be I don't want to end up being a nobody. Sometimes we parent out of fear. My parents parented out of fear. They didn't want me to experience the suffering that they did in the post-war context. And so they pushed and drove us to get a good education so that we can live with status because they're nobodies in this immigrant world. And you know what? I realized a lot of their parenting, they couldn't help it because you respond that way. But a lot of it was built off of fear. And I'll say, Mom, I'm going to be a pastor. Like, no! Why not? Because I'm afraid you're going to suffer. Like, interesting, But we're all like that. Some of us are leading out of fear. We're parenting out of fear. Fear is a powerful motivator. We're built that way, okay? We're built to pay attention to the thing that is most threatening, to make it that thing most consequential. If you're in the water and this happens to you, okay, guess what you're going to do? you're going to run away, swim away as fast as you can. If you can think about it. Because if you've ever seen Jaws, okay, half of the country, after seeing Jaws, couldn't take a bath in the bathtub anymore because that's how afraid they were. I'm not joking. This is before horror flicks and everybody's desensitized. It was that scary. Think about it. Fear is a powerful motivator. But here's the problem. Fear motivates you to run away from the thing that you think is the most important. It doesn't actually empower you to think, who am I becoming? Where am I going? Who am I serving? Yeah. Some of us are making really important decisions, even in our finances, based on fear. God is saying, be generous here. And I'm like, no, I can't. Because I can't trust you here. I can't trust you here. I'm afraid of poverty. I'm afraid of losing everything. I'm afraid of having nothing. Those are very real fears, but they also are diagnostics. They show you exactly where God wants to put a fearlessness in you. A fearlessness to say, when you follow me, I'm going to provide. I'm going to protect. I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do. Even when you go through these ups and downs, I am going to show you how faithful, how good I am. I'm with you every moment. I am counting the hairs on your head. All the little details that you're going through, I'm there. The fear can be a diagnostic. Think about the thing that keeps you up at night. The thing that concerns you, the anxiety that actually is rolling through your heart and mind. That's the very place where God's saying, if you follow me here, if you trust me here, even to the point of these people their lives are in danger, guess what? I get to show you that even past that, through that, I'm going to bring life out of you. I'm going to bring you faithfully through. It's always been fear versus faith. Fear versus faith. In your grace groups today, you have a chance to talk through some of that. What in your circumstances, what in your inner heart are you wrestling with? And that God can come in, and through prayer and through trust, we can actually experience a boldness. We're also going to have a time when we're talking about going to India. And if you're interested in experiencing, not fear, but an interesting God showing up in ways that you'd be so surprised about, giving you this confidence and a boldness to do things that you never expected, guess what? That's the opportunity. This is what it means to follow Jesus. It's not just for missionaries, not just for martyrs. It's for every Christ follower. Would you bow your heads in me as we pray?